me come and present today. As I mentioned before, my name is Krista Rowland, and I'm the Director of Community Impact with United Way of Treasure Valley. Just to kind of level set you about United Way, so we are one of 7 United Ways in the state of Idaho. So we have United Ways really covering every region of the state. United Way of Treasure Valley is the biggest. We cover the 10 southwest counties of Idaho. But we work in partnership with the United Ways all across the state. I'm going to focus my presentation kind of on community schools today because I think that's what you all wanted to hear about, but I do want to talk just a little bit about United Way and our general work. So we fight for the health, education, and financial stability of every person in the Treasure Valley. And our work right now touches about a third of Treasure Valley residents actually receive some sort of support or connection to United Way. We do this through a number of ways. First of all, our work surfaces or focuses on data. So we do some really great data collection. You guys may be familiar with the ALICE report. That's Asset Limited Income Constrained Employed. And what that report is just really an accurate reflection of how many people are struggling to make ends meet in the state of Idaho. And that report really tells that picture of those folks we know don't always qualify for federal or state support, but are still really struggling to make ends meet. So that's one of the data reports that we collect. We also do a community assessment every 3 years, which we just released this last year. And that data really helps shape our work. It tells us where to focus our efforts. So when we go into the community and we fundraise around needs. So we figure out really where the biggest needs are in the Treasure Valley and where efforts really need to be rallied and focused. And then we invite donors to engage with us and provide their hands, their hearts, their resources. And then we unite those to support the community. And so that looks a little bit, there's some varied ways we do that. First of all, there's some of our direct impact work, which I'll talk about today. We have a lot of legacy projects we've started. We helped start the Idaho Suicide Prevention Hotline. We helped start the Allenbaugh House. We helped start the 211 care line, as well as Treasure Valley Education Partnerships. So we really focus on the systems level and where the gaps are and try and help fill those gaps with that systems level work. Additionally, we do have a grant process and we support around 30 organizations in the community each year with some grant funding. And those community organizations provide resources to the community or support to the community in areas that we're trying to focus on, depending on where we've highlighted those needs on our data. So today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about our community school work because I think that may be the most applicable to this specific group. And so before I get started, I did want to know if anyone in this group was familiar with community schools or the community school strategy. If you are, if you just give me a hand raise here so I can kind of get an idea of who has heard of this or if you're brand new to this. Okay, looks like most are brand new. So first of all, we are at a time like no other for community needs, as we all know, and specifically, I want to focus around education today. Nationally, there is some research coming out predicting that we are going to have a COVID-19 slide. And what that means is essentially those students who've been impacted by COVID by not having consistent education and just in general, the disruptions of our education system are likely to set some students behind where they were as of March 2020 of last year when COVID started and schools started to be disrupting, or that they will flatline and not really make academic achievements. And that is due to a number of things. First of all, obvious disruptions to education. We know that education went virtually and many students no longer had access to their learning in a way that they did before. We certainly had a digital divide where when schools went virtual, there were many students that didn't have access to their school because they didn't have things like internet or a computer. But additionally, we know that families are facing challenges like never before. Unemployment, food insecurity, homelessness, all of these things have increased since the start of COVID-19. And we know that there's more impacts to come with things like the federal eviction moratorium running out here shortly. So there is an urgency like never before. And there is in education a new strategy, or a newer strategy, that really has shown its impact and its effectiveness during COVID-19. And it's called the community school strategy. There's about 30 community schools around the state of Idaho, and tens of thousands nationwide. And these schools have really been able to jump in and really help families in a very quick and responsive way during COVID-19. We know that students before COVID-19 were already coming to their schools with a lot of baggage, things like hunger, homelessness, sickness, mental health, substance abuse in families, and so many other barriers to that were preventing them from being able to be successful inside the classroom. You can imagine a student who's facing hunger or doesn't know where they're going to sleep at night. Really coming to the classroom and focusing on their academics is really challenging. So this was an issue before COVID-19. And now with COVID-19, obviously those issues have just been exacerbated. But there is this strategy that we really think has the ability to really help solve or address these barriers that are facing families. And I want to share with you a short video on this. Please stop me if you can't hear the sound. I think you should be able to, because I just shared my sound, but let me know.
What makes a school a great school? Caring for the whole child, expanding the horizons of learning, building relationships with families, working together to realize a shared vision. This is the school every student needs. This is a community school. Community schools are public schools that partner with stakeholders to create the conditions students need to thrive. Community schools can be found across the United States, and their numbers are growing fast. But what exactly makes a school a community school? They integrate student supports. Clinics, counselors, and other services ensure each and every student is ready to learn. They expand and enrich learning. Extended school days, summer programs, and real-world experiences help students reach their full potential. They engage families and communities. Partnering with residents to identify and meet community needs makes everyone feel safe, welcome, and involved in school. They lead in collaboration. Inclusive decision-making and peer learning builds trust among students, educators, families, and communities. When a school stands on these 4 pillars, it's a community school. Research supports this 4-pillar approach, but there's no one-size-fits-all model. Every community school is different because each community is different. Figuring out what it looks like in your community starts by getting actual community members involved. That's the full-time job of community school coordinators. They're the human bridge connecting all the partners and stakeholders that make community schools possible. So that's what makes a school a community school. Now, how do you pay for it? Startup costs like hiring a full-time coordinator can be raised from foundations or state and local governments. Tapping into existing funding and partnering with local businesses can bring in service providers. Sharing resources and staff with partners can help everyone do more. And as a community school becomes more established, leaders can advocate for budgets that sustain their impact and new funding to expand it. Every community school is different. What will yours be like?
So that's just a short little video about community schools, and that comes from the National Coalition for Community Schools. There are a couple nationwide networks that support this work. So to dive a little bit more into what this looks like. So on the left, you'll see a visual here of kind of how we like to describe community schools sometimes. So the rotary foam might be compared to a conventional school or traditional school. And that is that it does one function, it does academics, and it does it very, very well. But what we need is really education that fits the 21st century. And so that is really community schools. So we can akin that to a smartphone where families and students in a community school really have access to all of the resources and supports they need to be able to be successful. We talk a lot about an academic achievement gap in education, and that really refers to the fact that there are students out there who, statistically are more likely to score lower on assessments, and that's because of a number of barriers, including poverty and many other things. But that academic achievement gap, I think, is not the way we should be referring to it. It's really an opportunity gap. We know that if certain students and families don't have access to the same opportunities as others, they're not going to be able to be successful or be able to, for instance, score at grade level on assessments. And so if we can try and get those resources really to where it's most convenient for families to access, we're all going to be more successful. So the community school really is able to bring these resources into where it's most convenient for school or for families and students to be able to access those resources. And then additionally, there is someone called the community school coordinator. It's a person who's really a resource navigator within this school. And their job is to really understand all of the needs of the families and really try and engage partnerships and resources to come in and provide those at the school building that are going to best meet the needs of students and families. So for example, some examples of resources that come into a community school: out of school time learning, early childhood education like preschool and childcare services, basic needs, so maybe a food pantry, clothing pantry, mentoring, tutoring, health services. Some schools actually co-locate with the health center. Mental behavioral counseling. Some schools are actually co-locating with a mental behavioral private counselor who can provide additional resources to the school. Adult education like GED or career training or parenting classes or English classes. Community engagement, so engaging the local community also in those efforts. And then family engagement is a huge component of this. And everything really comes together to support the learning of the student and the success of the family. And it is coordinated by the resource coordinator, who sort of acts as that connecting system, sort of like our operating system of our smartphone, and helps connect all these pieces and parts and keep them operating in a really strong way. So this is not really a new way of thinking. A lot of schools are doing a lot of this. A lot of schools are offering a lot of additional resources. But the difference here is that rather than just a traditional school sort of offering a food pantry, it really has a lot of intentionality behind it. It's based on assessments, needs assessments, to really make sure we understand what families really need in a certain community. The engagement of these community partners, and the way of doing it is, rather than just kind of co-locating, it's really a partnership where everyone comes together to support academics. So for instance, the mental behavioral counselor, rather than just coming and providing that resource on site, they're actually working in collaboration with the school to say, how can we better support your school climate? How can we work together to support such and such student? And ultimately, in a lot of communities, these resources actually get extended to community members. So for instance, certainly these exist in urban areas, like Boise has 6 community schools, but we're also seeing this in areas like Marsing. Marsing started up its community school and its community hub. And it has co-located resources that the entire community are now able to access. And that's really important in a community like Marsing, where a lot of these community resources started to pull out over the years. For instance, there really wasn't a food pantry anymore or a senior center. And now by having a community school, they're able to offer a lot of those things. So the Marsing Community School has things like preschool now, parenting classes, English classes, they have a food pantry, a clothing pantry, they have mental behavioral counselor, they have adult education happening there, they have senior support services, and a multitude of other things happening. There are the 4 pillars that video mentioned, so expanded and enriched learning time and opportunities, collaborative leadership and practices, meaning that those organizations that are partnering with the school are really leading in collaboration with the school. It's not just co-location, they're actually a part of the school and a part of what happens in the school. Active family and community engagement. Family are involved as partners in figuring out what this looks like, and then integrated student supports, which could be things like a food pantry or a medical health center. So results nationwide from this, we're seeing better work habits. We're seeing academic effort and performances increasing. Grades and test scores are going up, improved high school graduation, and a decrease in the achievement gap. We're also seeing a huge leverage of resources. So a social return on investment study shows that we get about $10 to $14 in social value for every dollar that's spent on a community school coordinator. And so that could be in services saved from remediation and having to catch students up, or in juvenile justice or criminal justice and various social services. And then a cost benefit shows that we get about $12 to every dollar. So every resource that's brought in, for instance, dental services and clothing and mental health services and all those sorts of things, there's about $12 of value for every dollar spent on a coordinator. It's grown really huge here in the Treasure Valley. So we introduced this strategy to the Treasure Valley in 2014. And we did that based on data. We recognized from the data that I mentioned that schools really, or that folks were having trouble accessing resources in the community, that it wasn't necessarily a lack of resources, it was a lack of ability to get there and get what they needed. So we looked to other communities, and this was a strategy that other United Ways were using. So it's really that idea of bringing the services to the people rather than having people have to go to access services. So we introduced that in 2016. Boise Schools opened their first 4 community schools, and we provided some support and technical assistance in them and standing that up. 2017, we saw 7, and we opened our own community school in Sacagawea Elementary in Caldwell. And then now fast forward, and we have about 30 community schools around Idaho and growing. So again, we introduced the strategy to Idaho. We do have a school basic needs pantry that schools can come and access and bring important resources back to their school, like hygiene kits and things. We have been the backbone for Sacagawea Community School. We started a community school learning community that helps connect all these coordinators and provide a place for them to learn best practices. We host a yearly conference, which we just finished up last week. We provide technical support. We helped connect community partners into this strategy. We do provide some grant funding, and we lead the Idaho Coalition for Community Schools. So really our role has been to support this work as it's been stood up, to strengthen it by providing networking and resource extension, and finding ways to really make it have access to all of the resources that community school coordinators need to help families. We've worked to spread it to new schools and to spread it to community partners to make sure community partners are aware they can engage in this, and then engaging the community and making sure community members know about this. So that was a lot in a pretty short amount of time. I did leave my contact information for you here. You're welcome to reach out to me, but I don't know if you have time, but I'm willing to take questions if you do.
Hi, Krista. So there's actually through the Department of Ed, there's a full service community schools grant, and it's not an easy grant to write.
Yeah.
It's due today. I'm trying to get it submitted. I've written it a couple times and my score goes up every year, but I wish I would have had this presentation before that, because it makes it more understandable for what they're actually looking for versus what the Department of Ed, how they describe it.
Yeah, definitely. Charlene, who are you applying with? What district?
Kamiah School District.
Oh, sure. Okay. Yeah. The full service community school grant is a fantastic grant, and it really provides a great deal of support to communities, but it is a really hard grant to get. However, right now there's about 30 million each year in funding for that full service community school grant. And this year, actually this week, I believe, there's an expansion act to that full service community school being introduced at Congress. And if that were to be approved, it would mean a really great influx of resources towards that grant. So it would go up to 500 million over the course of 5 years, I believe, to support community schools. And so that would mean that more schools would be eligible for that funding. But when we apply for those grants here in Idaho, we are competing with communities that have done community school work for a very long time. So it's very challenging. But I think future years, I would tell you keep applying, because I really think that the chances are going to get better and better if that expansion act goes through, because there will be more funding available for it through the feds.
So is that something that we would partner with our United Way on as well? Yes.
I would recommend it. Yeah. We've partnered before on that grant, and I think just having as many partners as you can kind of engaged in the writing of the grant and the as a partner, you know, demonstrating a letter of support or whatever makes your application stronger. I will say most of our United Ways are aware of this now and trying to kind of engage in community schools, but none of the other United Ways are doing it quite at the depths that we are here in the Treasure Valley.
Okay.
But it is starting to spread to other United Ways here in Idaho. So you will probably start to see it come up as some of their strategies.
Do you know if we have any community schools up north, up here, this direction?
Coeur d'Alene is trying to start one, and they are really at the very beginning stages of that. I believe Rigby recently has started some efforts around that. And then I'd have to look, I do have a list of kind of everyone who in theory is kind of trying to become a community school right now. And I can share that with anyone that wants it.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. So I hope this was helpful today. I took this lens because it sounded like community schools might be the most applicable thing to you all, but I'd love to share more with you all about United Way. So, you know, feel free to reach out if you have any questions about community schools or any other questions. And I'd really encourage you to check out our website and also encourage you to check out some of the data I mentioned. I think the Alice report would be of most interest to you all. That report actually does break down by county to show you the true cost of living and the true cost of expenses versus the wages that folks are earning in specific counties. You can break it all the way down to zip code, and it's just a really useful report. So I'll share it in the chat box before I go. I will make sure and share that Alice report link with you, and then also the link to our website.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you bet.
I had one